There's so little time and so much to disabuse you of. I hate to begin this way. I hate to start with a confession. But the school has been really gracious here in honoring me like this. And I know something the school doesn't know. And I just feel a bit the hypocrite for not starting there. For a moment, this is going to sound like an AA meeting, but forgive me as I start over. My name is David Bradley, and while at Swarthmore, I was a college Republican. It gets much worse than this. I transferred to Swarthmore as a junior, and in the preceding 2 years, I worked in the Nixon White House. I know the college made a mistake in taking me in. What is not clear is what exactly was I thinking when I said, gee, maybe it's Swarthmore where I'll finally fit in. So I want you to picture a very lonely junior transfer student with his tray walking around Sharples, stopping people and saying, I'm sorry, do you know where the Republican table is? I was too eager for conversation. I'd begin things enthusiastically like, don't you really think Henry Kissinger deserves the Nobel Peace Prize? Okay, apart from the Cambodian bombings, doesn't know him. This now seems inconceivable to me, but it's in fact correct. I needed one more letter of recommendation, so I asked it of my mentor at the White House, which makes me the only person, at least in my year, who had a character reference from John Ehrlichman. The Atlantic publishes the writing of a famous French philosopher, Bernard-Henri Lévy. He's known popularly as BHL. He is a dramatic figure. He's dramatically attractive. He has long-haired, black hair to his shoulders. He famously keeps his shirt unbuttoned almost to the bottom. But he's thought by his fellow academics to be a bit shallow and vain. One of the moral philosophers in France captures BHL's personal moral philosophy as, God is dead, but my hair is perfect. And that captures my arrival here at Swarthmore. I was shallow and I was vain. And if you would allow me, I wanted to tell you two stories. One story is of deep gratitude to the college, and the second story is a cautionary tale to the graduating seniors. But as to gratitude, it is fulsome. However I had gotten by in high school, it had nothing to do with the rigors and disciplines of academics, so it was kind of intellectual shock and awe when I arrived here on the campus and simply could not understand the magnitude of the workload. It was my first week. I was in McCabe at a Carroll looking at the semester syllabus for a political philosophy seminar I was taking. And a young woman came over. She was in the seminar. And she said, you're the transfer student, aren't you? And I said, yes. And we chatted for a moment. And then I told her, I am almost welling up with tears. I am so frustrated and angry about the magnitude of the semester syllabus here. And she said, David, did you say semester syllabus? And I said, yes. And she said, that's this week's reading list. And exactly therein began Swarthmore's gift to me. I can remember the transformation as if the thing were physical, as if I were in a room and I were thinking and thinking and thinking to the limits of my ability and reached a wall where there was the limit of productive thought and would stop, and then Swarthmore sort of inexplicably would say, well, why don't you think a little harder? And you'd think, and suddenly you'd see that that wall was porous. It was almost like a gauze curtain, and you could go across. And on the other side was a whole other room of thought, much harder to get to, much of it original insight. I was not as good as most at getting across that curtain, but I can't tell you how transformative it was to know that space was there and to have visited it from time to time. And that particular metaphor is something that captured the center of the two companies that my wife and I built over time. And it's central to the privilege I feel in owning the Atlantic. Now, I have been grateful to Swarthmore for 36 years. And the school, Rebecca Chopp, and the board have now honored me. It's hard to know how I could be more grateful than I've been. But it's like the first week again with the gauze curtain and the coming across and finding suddenly you are in another room you did not know of, and here the gratitude is fulsome. I'm very appreciative of President Chopp, very appreciative of the board. To the students, I have a far darker message. This is a cautionary tale. It's a story of my personal woe. I want you to listen closely, and I want you to listen with mounting fear. As an aside, I have a friend named Leon Wieseltier. He's the literary editor of the New Republic. And he heard me sort of winding up to speak on something, and he said, "Ah, I see. A flood of light is about to be cast, where heretofore there was no darkness." So here's my cautionary tale. The year is 1975. It's my senior year. It's come time to think about life after Swarthmore. There's a little-known rule at Swarthmore, which is that all Swarthmore Republicans have to apply to Harvard Business School. And so I was making my application, and it arrived to be February, and I went up to Boston to do my interview. It was a typical February day in Boston. It was raining, it was maybe 40 degrees, it was dark by 4:30. I was staying in a friend brown house, a friend named Ralph. He lived in the back bay section of Boston, back when it used to be a transitional neighborhood, right across from the Christian Science Church Center. And I had done awkwardly at my Harvard Business School interview. So Ralph came home and offered to take me out to dinner to celebrate the fact that at least it was done. And we walked out onto the street, and he was locking the door as brownstone, and I was standing in the dark, in the rain, under an umbrella, waiting. And this young man joined me under the umbrella and started asking street directions. And then Ralph finished locking the door, and he came in under the umbrella. And no sooner had Ralph arrived than this young man took out a handgun. I don't know how many of you are in the NRA or deal with handguns. It was astonishing. It was this big. It was just tiny. And he took it and he put it to my forehead like this, and he demanded that Ralph give him his wallet and his watch. Ralph refused. And we began a countdown from 10 to 3 before Ralph decided his wallet and his watch weren't all that important. But worse than this, the entire event was filmed on the security cameras of the Christian Science Church Center, and it was used every year for a while in training new security guards in the Christian Science movement. Some of you that maybe in the parent generation remember ABC Wide World of Sports, where week after week, month after month, that skier goes off the side of the... Well, that's what we were for the teaching courses of the Christian Science Guards. And if you talked to a guard and asked him what he thought, he'd say, well, of Ralph, he looked frightened and he looked stubborn, which I think is correct. Of me, they will say that I looked oblivious. And the central detail that they will point to in my oblivion is that throughout the entire course of the robbery, I continued to hold the umbrella over this man's head. Witness the high manners of my 20s. 3 parts courtesy, for every 1 part cunning. But what's the moral for the graduating seniors? It was right there at the beginning. I'm sure you see it. I'm sure it's shouting out to you. Never, never, never leave the campus. It is a frightening, terrifying world out there. It is Hobbesian. It is short, it is brutal, it is full of armed robberies on darkened streets. It ages you horribly. Look at me. Look at me. Is this what you intend? So I hope President Chopp will consider this a constructive recommendation. My advice to you today is to refuse to graduate. Don't walk across this stage. Don't take that piece of parchment that eases you out into the real world. Groups of you should go over to McCabe Library and chain yourself together. Handcuff yourself to the parish furniture. I'd recommend some large block of you go visit President Chopp's office and just settle in. This worked out so well for us in the 1960s. So I'll end there. And now, old Swarthmore Republicans, we never die. We merely fade away. Thank you.